In Arkansas, there's an old expression, slow as molasses in January. But on January 15, 1919, in Boston's North End, molasses was anything but slow. A massive storage tank sat right on the edge of the bustling commercial waterfront. It towered 50 feet high and 90 feet wide, holding 2.3 million gallons of thick, raw molasses. Shortly after 12:30 p.m., the metal sides of that tank ripped apart. 2.5 million gallons exploded outward, creating a 25-foot wave of molasses racing through the cobblestone streets at 35 miles per hour. The sheer weight of the liquid obliterated buildings and snapped the heavy steel girders of the local elevated train line. 21 people were killed, and 150 more were injured by the crushing force. The tank's owner, the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, immediately pointed fingers elsewhere. They told the press that Italian anarchists had planted a bomb, claiming the explosion was a deliberate act of political sabotage. That claim presented investigators with two distinct possibilities. Either someone had launched a successful terror attack on American soil, or a corporation had built a ticking time bomb right in the middle of a crowded neighborhood. Finding the actual cause meant investigators had to understand the mechanics of the flood itself. It was hard to comprehend how a notoriously sluggish syrup could travel fast enough to cause this level of destruction. A 2016 team of Harvard researchers provided the answer. This animation compares a standard fluid, like water, to molasses. While water flows at a constant rate regardless of how hard you push it, molasses is a non-Newtonian fluid. It actively changes its thickness based on the physical stress it experiences. The immense pressure of the bursting tank forced those molecular bonds to break down and realign. In a process called shear thinning, the violent rupture temporarily stripped the molasses of its viscosity, transforming it from a slow sludge into a liquid capable of sprinting through the city at highway speeds. But that speed didn't last. 2 days earlier, the tank had been filled with a fresh, warm shipment from the Caribbean. When that tropical syrup hit the 40-degree Boston air, the thermodynamics reversed the process. Within minutes, the rapidly cooling wave lost its heat and thickened back into a dense, unyielding gel. People caught in the wreckage found themselves trapped in a suffocating glue, making it incredibly difficult for rescue workers to dig them out. The physics of non-Newtonian fluids explain exactly how the syrup became a deadly mechanical trap. But the fluid dynamics only mattered because the container holding the molasses failed in the first place. The tank's construction in 1915 was managed by Arthur Gell, the treasurer for United States Industrial Alcohol. He had a background in finance, not architecture, and absolutely zero engineering experience. This cross-section shows the stark difference between the 1919 tank and standard safety requirements. To safely hold 13,000 tons of dense liquid, the steel walls needed substantial reinforcement. The metal Arthur Gell actually ordered for the tank was half as thick as it should have been. The steel itself was chemically flawed. It lacked manganese, making the metal highly brittle. The pressure of the molasses pushed against walls that were too rigid to flex, causing microscopic stress fractures to begin spiderwebbing outward from the rivet holes. The tank leaked from the day it was built. Whenever it was filled, neighbors reported hearing loud groaning noises coming from the metal. Instead of draining it to inspect the structural integrity, the company simply painted the tank brown to camouflage the leaking syrup. They took these risks because the molasses was being fermented to produce industrial alcohol, and the company was in a race against time. Prohibition, the 18th Amendment, was set to be ratified on January 16th, the very day after the disaster. The explosion was inevitable. There were no anarchists and no bombs. A corporation prioritized a narrow window of profit over structural safety, building a tank destined to burst. The residents of the North End refused to accept the company's story of sabotage. They took United States Industrial Alcohol to court. Families of the victims and injured survivors banded together. In total, 119 plaintiffs filed what became one of the first major class action lawsuits in Massachusetts history. The resulting legal battle was exhaustive. A court-appointed auditor named Hugh W. Ogden oversaw an investigation that lasted 3 full years and included sworn testimony from over 1,000 witnesses. Ogden's final report dismantled the sabotage theory completely. He ruled that the company was entirely responsible for the structural failure, forcing them to pay out $628,000 in damages to the victims' families. The ruling had immediate, systemic consequences. States and municipalities across the country overhauled their building codes. New laws were written to strictly require licensed architects and civil engineers to sign off on major construction projects. The 21 people who died in the Great Molasses Flood were the victims of profound negligence. But the legal and structural standards born from their tragic loss laid the foundation for the building codes that protect our cities today.